demonstration, I'm going to show you how to prepare an MDF block to carve a relief print. For this project, we're going to be using MDF, which is actually sawdust that is glued together. You can use pretty much any type of material to create a relief print. Traditionally, wood was used, which has benefits and drawbacks. With the wood, you get this kind of beautiful grain in your prints, but you also have to think about that grain when you're cutting into the block. So if you're trying to make a curve or going against the grain, often the grain will kind of chip up and affect the straightness or smoothness of your line. So with MDF, because there's no grain, because it's just sawdust glued together, you can make cuts in any direction without having to worry about it. So you'll each be getting a 9x12 MDF block. And the first thing you're going to want to do is stain your block. And this is because when we're cutting into the block, because MDF is the same color all the way through, sometimes it's difficult to know what material we've carved away and what material we've left. The material we carve away from a wood block is what stays white, or the color of the paper, and the material that we leave raised is what we'll print. So this is very important to remember when you're cutting your block. So I'm just using screen printing ink for this because we have a lot of it and we don't need a lot for the wood block. And I'm painting it onto the block with a chip brush. I'm trying not to apply it too thickly because I'm also just going to wipe it off afterwards so that it dries faster and there's not like this thick application of paint on it, because we don't need that. See, I'm kind of just dragging the ink over here until the entire block is covered. When it's covered, put that away. I have some paper towel here, and basically just gonna rub it in and like wipe off that excess, because we really just need a light coating of ink. And this will help it dry faster so that we can start transferring our image to the block. All right, so now we'll wait a few minutes for that to dry. Always make sure that if you use the brush to clean it. So before you start creating your image and carving, you're going to want to figure out how you want your image to look, because there's a couple ways of approaching a relief cut. And I recommend researching different artists, finding techniques that you like, and then incorporating that into your print. Because sometimes you can be a little bit more expressive with mark making, you can be really controlled, you can have, again, these like white outlines and black, or not black, but whatever color you want that prints, or you can do the reverse where the lines are actually the color and the white is carved away. Different types of mark making, so hatching and cross hatching and contour hatching. So figure out the way you want your image and plan accordingly. These are some examples of types of lines you can get. I'll show you in a minute. There's like different types of gouges to give you these really thick lines, V gouges to get thin lines. You can make these kind of types of small, kind of like pointillist or like kind of textured mark making. So these will stay the color of your paper, and around it will print the color you're printing, or you can make the marks on your block, carve around them, and now these marks will print the color you're printing and the rest will stay the color of your paper. And so you can see there's kind of like some fine scratchy marks here as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can make different types of marks, and it's good to think about the types of marks that you want to use in your image before you just start going for it. So here's an image. I looked at some engravings online, some woodcuts online, and I kind of figured out like areas that I want to take material away, areas that I want to leave, and then I'm going to do this kind of like line pattern in the background. So I've planned my image to look like the woodcut that I want to make. And I recommend doing this so that there's no surprises. If you want it to look a certain way, by planning, you'll be able to achieve that more accurately. So I have my image here. Again, whatever you put on the wood block and carve away is going to print in reverse. So if you're using words or your image looks a little bit awkward from the other angle, you either want to scan it into Photoshop, reverse it, and print it out. In this case, I've used a piece of tracing paper, so I can actually just use the back of it because the back is the reverse. Or you can use the light table again and transfer your drawing to the back before transferring it to your block. So in this case, I'm going to use this image. I have my block here, and I also have the red iron oxide transfer paper. So again, placing my red iron oxide transfer paper face down, taping it in place so it doesn't move on me. I've also drawn my image to scale so that I don't have to worry about sizing it down. And I'm just gonna kind of feel my way around the block. So where I've placed the edges will line up. Tape it down in place. And now I'm ready to start tracing over my lines. So just with a pencil, I'm going to trace over my lines. Again, I leave this little flap here so that I can see that my image has completely transferred underneath. Which I can see like that, so I can see the transferred image right there. So once I've transferred most of the basic imagery, I can take this off. And now something that I like to do, because I always like to overplan so that I don't make any mistakes when I'm trying to do something on the fly, is I block in everywhere that I want to keep to have print with Sharpie. And then everything that I want to carve away, I leave white. So this just helps me to kind of like visually figure out the information that I'm taking away and the information that I'm leaving. It's kind of tedious, but I feel like it's beneficial in the long run. So now I'm just going to redraw this on here. When you've finished planning out exactly the material you're taking away and the material you're leaving, you are ready to start cutting your block. So the first thing I would do actually is to seal your block with some clear polyurethane, and that will prevent your drawing from lifting up when you're printing. It also, like the top of the MDF is very porous, so it tends to suck in ink. So by sealing it, you prevent, especially when we're printing, the ink from soaking into the block and just staying on the surface so that it transfers to the paper better. To seal my block before carving, I carved a little bit there, but I'm going to seal it now. Make sure you turn on the ventilation for the ventilation hood. Place it inside like this. Here I just have this kind of Mod Podge gloss that I'm going to spray on, but you can use any kind of polyurethane. Shake it up. Spray into the booth. Just put a nice coating on it. This will seal your drawing onto the block. In some cases, it can make it a little bit easier to carve in terms of giving you really nice clean lines. And then once that dries, you're ready to finish carving your block. Once you've sealed your block, then you're ready to start carving. So a couple safety things, because we are going to be using sharp tools. This is called a bench hook. It's very important that you use these so that your block doesn't go flying. You have more control over the direction that you're cutting, and just all around good safety practice. I have my drawing close by to use as a reference, and then I have my tools. So I'm going to show you a couple different sets at varying price points. So this is the most affordable option. You can find them at your local arts and crafts stores. They come with a variety of ends that you can use to create different line weights and different textures. So usually they're stored in the bottom. How you switch them out is by twisting this top part, which loosens this small piece of metal inside so that you can take it out and switch it out for whichever size end you're looking for. So here we have a small V gouge. It's really hard to see, but basically the gouge, which is what these are called, comes to a point, which makes it look like a V. And then we also, here's another V gouge. So this is going to give you more delicate cuts. This is a U gouge, which is going to give you thicker cuts and remove more surface area. And so depending on what you need, you can switch it out with this. These are like not the best tools. They will do the job, but they can be a little bit frustrating, especially after you try some better tools. But another good practice is to make sure that you're honing your tool every few cuts. This is going to keep it nice and sharp so that you don't have to sharpen your tool. So every time you take a few cuts, come to the leather strap that has a little bit of honing compound and just drag your tool against it like this, which will make cutting a lot easier. These are the power grip tools that you can order on Amazon. I think they're about $25, which is actually not that bad considering what a step up they are from this tool. So these come with 5 gouges. Again, there's your V gouge for delicate lines. You have a thinner U gouge, a thicker U gouge. This tool is really good for removing and like flattening what we call chatter, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is really good at removing lots of material. And then you have this knife, which is good for getting like really, if you want a really like straight edge, use it with the ruler and draw down, and then you can like cut along that line and it'll make a really nice precise line. So power grip's great, also affordable. Flex cut is, I mean, I would say it's top of the line. So these tools can range from like $50 to $100. You can see how you get a variety of different gouges. This one's really, really good for removing material. And they just pop into this lovely handle here, which makes cutting really easy. And they have different sets that are based around what type of cutting you're doing. So if you need really like precise tools, they have one for detail. I think this is just kind of like a general set, but it's really great, but also really expensive. So when you're ready to cut, again, this leather strap applies to all these other tools as well. So we have our bench hook set up. When you're carving, always make sure that you're carving away from your body, because if the tool slips, you don't want it to jab into your skin. And that also goes for like cutting towards your hand. Make sure that your hand is always behind the tool, because without a doubt, like, some people are gonna get some sort of cut in this class, but to minimize injury, just remember to cut away from yourself. Don't cut like this, don't cut like this. Keep everything behind the tool. And, you know, you'll figure out a way of cutting that suits you. Sometimes I like to kind of push with my right hand and like hold down the nib with this hand. Be sure to collect all the little scrap pieces of wood. If they fall on the ground, make sure that you tidy up after yourself and carve away. This is time consuming, it is tedious, but it's also kind of meditative. So you can put a podcast on, you don't really have to think about anything except for being careful to not cut parts that you are trying to leave open. And again, making sure to use the honing compound to keep my tool sharp. You know, work slowly, pay attention to what you're doing. It's when we rush that mistakes happen. So just be careful.